I welcome in Powers on Sports podcast. I'm your host, Jason, down in Tampa. We are in early January here in the Sunshine State. National semifinals for the college football playoff are in the books. TCU with a pretty surprising upset of Michigan, and Georgia comes from way back to edge Ohio State at the buzzer on a missed field goal. We are setting up a national title game on Monday night out in Los Angeles at SoFi Stadium. We've got NFL regular season wrapping up week 18 this week, playoffs next week, and obviously we're gonna hit on the terrible tragedy that happened Monday night in Cincinnati with Lamar Hamlin. In that situation, as of the time of this recording, we do not have any definitive news on his condition. I know there's been reports that he's getting, as of Wednesday afternoon, that he's getting a little bit better. We don't know what that means, but he is still obviously sedated and being cared for with great care up in Cincinnati, Ohio. So don't have any. We're going to talk about that situation here in just a minute, but going to hit on a couple of things. We got a good show episode for you this week. We're going to talk to Jim Leavitt, former USF head football coach, former Super Bowl, a member of the Super Bowl staff of the San Francisco 49ers, with Jim Harbaugh, who's now in the news. We're going to talk to Coach Leavitt about the semifinal matchups. How was TCU able to upset Michigan? Georgia's Ohio State review. We're also going to preview the national title game with obviously on Monday night, Georgia TCU out in Los Angeles. So we're going to get a real in-depth breakdown of that. We're going to talk. I'm also going to hit on a couple topics here before we get to that. Some breaking news and related to U.S. soccer and Greg Berhalter. That's kind of a Melrose Place kind of situation. Some reality stuff, some pretty interesting stuff we'll talk about. How about Lamar Jackson still not practicing with the Baltimore Ravens? I got a couple thoughts on that topic. Week 18, you got a lot of teams that are out of the mix, are sitting quarterbacks. No Justin Fields for Chicago. You got some other guys around the league that are being sat down. Younger players are going to be playing. We'll talk about a couple of scheduling things with the NFL as well. But let's first before we get to Coach Leavitt, let's first get to Damar Hamlin, the DB, Pittsburgh, plays for the Buffalo Bills. Terrible situation Monday night on the just the tackle of T. Higgins. He collapses on the field, has to be resuscitated on the field. What a job by the training staffs of both teams getting out there and getting the necessary CPR action going, and obviously getting the defibrillator out there. Great job by the medical staffs of both organizations and the stadium staff there in Cincinnati for having all that stuff ready to go. They apparently resuscitated him on the field in front of both teams. You saw, if you were watching the Monday Night Football coverage, you saw the anguish on everybody's faces. Very, very glaring, very, very emotional. If you're a fan in that stadium, I mean, just in disbelief of what's going on. I'm sure in certain views of that stadium, you could probably see that very well, what was going on. Watching on TV, obviously, you had a pretty good sense pretty quick that it was something probably heart-related, life and death situated with some of the views you saw. It wasn't just a normal concussion or a guy who hurt his leg or knee or whatever. You could tell really quickly with Tre'Davious White, Diggs, Josh Allen, their reactions, their gestures were very apparent of what was going on. So, again, reminded me back to the Hank Gathers situation back in 1990. If you don't know Hank Gathers was the All-American basketball player at Loyola Marymount who collapsed and died in the West Coast Conference tournament on the court. Obviously, situations were way different back then. I don't even think they had a defibrillator and all that was there. Many of the medical things that these facilities were required to have that have just progressed in the last 30 years were because of Hank Gathers. The mandate of having a defibrillator and paramedics and all that stuff on site. A lot of those things came about because of the Hank Gathers situation. We don't know if Damar Hamlin had a pre-existing condition. We don't know if this was just a random act of him getting hit in a perfect spot. You've heard some cardiologists on TV probably talk about a condition where a heart attack or a cardiac arrest event could be triggered by just the perfect confluence of being hit in the right spot on your chest, your electric rhythms of your body and the heart at just the absolute perfect moment that causes that. But I won't. But again, none of that has been confirmed by any means by anybody. So he's still in critical condition in Cincinnati's in the UC hospital. So we're hoping for nothing but the best for Damar. Good luck to him. And obviously the organization. The game was canceled. There's not been any finalized decision yet of what the NFL is going to do related to that game. It will not be played this weekend. The options that are being discussed are potentially playing it next weekend. In conjunction with some conjunction of the playoffs beginning potentially on the NFC while they play this last game, but no definitive announcement has been made by the NFL yet either way what they're going to do. Obviously this game has such, from a NFL football perspective, the game was being hyped up so much because of what two really good teams and also the ramifications that game had on playoff positioning in the AFC, especially with the 1, 2, and 3 seed with Kansas City, Buffalo, and Cincinnati. So again, from all reports, all games will be played this Sunday. The normal Week 18 schedule will be played, and then we'll see what the NFL decides to do about finishing up the Buffalo-Cincinnati game. We'll be very interested to see what the emotional reaction is of all the players around the league this Sunday, especially the Buffalo who host New England, which is an important game for New England. If they win, they're in the playoffs, and obviously Cincinnati is going to play Baltimore, and that's a critical game as well. Potentially for playoff seeding. So be very interesting to see what the reaction around the league is this Sunday as far as the level of play and just that stuff goes. So let's go to Lamar Jackson. Lamar Jackson got hurt in early December, if you recall, hurt a knee. There's been lots of speculation about what's going on. Why is it taking Lamar so long? Hasn't practiced yet. It's been well over a month. The interesting comments coming out of John Harbaugh's mouth in Baltimore seemed like he has no idea what's going on, when Lamar would be eligible to practice. And typically when there's a knee injury, a legit injury, the doctors tell the head coach, hey, he'll be ready to go in 3 or 4 weeks. We've heard that for quite some time, that the timeline was probably 3 to 4 weeks. Still haven't seen Lamar Jackson even practice anything. I've got a feeling, this is just my opinion, but I think it's got some legitimacy. I think Lamar Jackson is sandbagging the Baltimore Ravens here with this injury. He didn't get his contract extension. I think he's frustrated that he didn't get paid, that he didn't get Deshaun Watson money before the season. I mean, to me, there's no way I'm paying that guy $250 million guaranteed. I would structure a deal where I would be willing to pay him 180, 200 million, but I'm not giving that guy a guaranteed 5-year contract for 250 or higher. The way the guy plays, he's potentially injury prone with as much running as he does, mobility. He is not an elite passer. He's a good passer, not elite. And at some point here in the next couple years, his legs will not be nearly as much of a factor as they have been early in his career. So interesting how the Baltimore Ravens are playing this, and Lamar Jackson, in my opinion, is milking this. Don't be surprised if Lamar Jackson doesn't play another down for the Baltimore Ravens this year. If he would have, you'd have heard about him practicing. Seems like the relationship with the organization has floundered due to the lack of the contract extension. We'll see what the Ravens do in the offseason. If they franchise him, I would imagine they will. But very interesting thing to keep an eye on here in Baltimore as we move into the offseason with the Ravens and Lamar Jackson, especially if it comes out that he could have practiced and potentially didn't choose to do that. We'll see what he ends up doing for the playoffs, if he ends up practicing next week and potentially playing in the wild card round. But a very interesting thing to keep your eye on in Baltimore. In my opinion, Lamar Jackson is milking this and is not going to play another down for the Baltimore Ravens this year. All right, let's transition to U.S. soccer. Some very breaking news story in the last day or so concerning World Cup coach, U.S. national team coach Greg Berhalter. Just a refresher, Berhalter was the coach in the World Cup. His contract expired at the end of December, and there were allegedly talks going on to see if they were going to extend him and bring him back as the national team coach. And it has been reported as of Wednesday that an allegation that he kicked his then girlfriend when he was in college, who's now his wife, have 4 children with the guy with Berhalter, that apparently there was a kicking incident, as we have a nice thunderstorm starting out here in Tampa with the lightning blaring going off in the background. So if you heard the lightning and the cracking, that's a thunderstorm starting here in Tampa on Wednesday night. But the story that there was an investigation being launched by U.S. Soccer into this potential domestic incident back when Berhalter was in college with his girlfriend. It turns out the person that leaked the story to U.S. Soccer is one of Berhalter's best friends, the family of Claudio Reyna. Why is Claudio Reyna? Why is that such a first of all, they were good friends. They played together. Number 2, remember Gio Reyna, the 20-year-old on the U.S. national team, had some issues at the World Cup. Didn't play much. I think he played 1 time in the 4 games. There was all kind of allegations about his work ethic, his lack of being a part of the team, and all that stuff. And now it's being surmised that Claudio Reyna's wife, Gio Reyna's mom, leaked this information to U.S. Soccer in mid-December to retaliate for Berhalter not playing the son, Gio, in the World Cup. I mean, you talk about a shady thing to do. Wow. This investigation, I mean, Berhalter has come out with a public statement this week admitting to the incident back when he was 18 with the girlfriend, now wife. He admitted to kicking her in a bar altercation. They were in an altercation, but a disagreement at a bar. So he has admitted to this, but the leak coming from one of his best friends, the mother of a guy who was on the World Cup team who happened to not play very much in the World Cup, is very, very shady. Very much keep an eye on this. Berhalter probably will not be back as men's national team coach anyway, but just keep an eye on this Beverly Hills 90210 saga story of U.S. Soccer. Again, I know there's not a lot of soccer fans out there, but this is a pretty interesting story. All right. Scheduling in the NFL this weekend. A couple interesting notes on the scheduling of games. Detroit Green Bay is going to be the Sunday night game, prime time. The reason that's important, the NFL did Detroit no favors because Detroit is tied with Green Bay in the standings at 8-8. Green Bay controls their destiny. If they win the game, they're in the playoffs. But Detroit can get in the playoffs if they were to beat Green Bay, but they need the Rams to beat Seattle. And you say, okay, that's good. The NFL typically schedules games that have equal importance on relative teams at the same time. They schedule the Seattle game at 4:25, which means if Seattle beats the Rams, that means the Detroit Lions are out of the playoffs, making that Sunday night game, from a Detroit perspective, meaningless, paving the way for Aaron Rodgers and the Green Bay Packers to get in the playoffs. Dan Campbell has come out and said, we're going to play hard, but from a mental psyche perspective, you're the Detroit Lions at Lambeau Field Sunday afternoon at about 6:30, 7 o'clock, and you hear the result that the Rams have lost to the Seahawks, meaning your season's over. How much effort, how much true effort and ball-busting effort are you really going to give Sunday night at Lambeau Field? Don't like how the NFL did that. The one game that really had major playoff implications but didn't rely on other results would have been the Patriots in Buffalo. Patriots win, they're in the playoffs. Doesn't matter what other people do, the Jets, Miami. If the Patriots win the game, they're in the playoffs. So Pittsburgh would have had to rely on that. To me, Buffalo, New England should have been the game Sunday night in Orchard Park. Obviously, this would have been prior to the DeMar Hamlin situation, because that game has a direct impact both on the 1 seed in the AFC and 2, the Patriots getting into the playoffs since they control their destiny. So to me, that's the game that should have been Sunday night in Orchard Park. Belichick going to see Buffalo, a division rival. Lots on the line for both teams. So I didn't like that the NFL didn't do that. I wish NBC would have taken that game, but a lot of meaningless games this weekend. Houston's potentially on the clock. If they lose, they got the number 1 pick. If they win and Chicago loses, Chicago has the number 1 pick. Thus, Chicago sits Justin Fields with a quote-unquote hip injury. So interesting to see how those things unfold. But there's your draft status as well. Houston's on the clock unless they win the game, and then Chicago potentially would be on the clock if they were to lose the game against Minnesota as well. The 7th seed in the AFC is down in New England, Miami and the Jets. Good thing is Miami and the Jets play each other. Jets are out, excuse me. It's Miami, New England, and Pittsburgh. Pittsburgh could get in if Miami and New England lose. So that'll be an interesting storyline as we go into Sunday afternoon. Obviously in the NFC, it's Detroit, Seattle, and Green Bay. And we've just discussed those scenarios. So interesting week 18. Again, there's only 3 or 4 games that have any bearing. You have Philadelphia that needs to win the game to clinch the 1 seed. Most likely, if Philly wins, Dallas will be coming to Tampa. If Philly loses and Dallas wins, Dallas will win that division, and now Philly will be coming to Tampa as the 5 seed. So important for Philly to win the game. Most likely, Jalen Hurts will be back for the Eagles and all that. So coming in the next couple of days, you will see the NFL come out with their scheduling correction to this Buffalo and Cincinnati game, how they handle that moving forward with the wild card rounds and all that stuff. So we'll see how that goes. All right, Georgia TCU. You're going to hear a full breakdown by Coach Jim Leavitt about the semifinal games and a preview of the final games. I kind of like Georgia. Georgia's about a 13-point favorite, which is kind of a high. I guessed about 10, but the line is 13. That is a big number. Georgia potentially could beat them soundly, but again, this TCU team might be a team of destiny. One of these, one of these years kind of teams. We've seen it over the years in different sports, college basketball, NFL. We've seen the Giants do it a couple times as a wild card. This TCU team has got a lot of grit. They've been in a lot of close games. They know how to come from behind. They know how to play hard. They were as physical, if not way more physical, than the Michigan Wolverines, who most thought was one of the most physical teams in the country. So give them credit. Now they face the beast in Georgia, Kirby Smart, that veteran offense, the blitzing you're going to see out of Georgia, and the physicality of the SEC. So interesting game in Los Angeles Monday night. If you're in the Tampa Bay area, I will be at Beef O'Brady's on Bush Boulevard and Himes Avenue doing a pregame show starting around 6:45, 7 o'clock. So if you're in the area, you want to come watch the game, have a good meal, come on out to Beef's. If not, you can go to my Facebook page, Jason Powers, and see the live stream pregame show that we talk about. We'll have a couple guests on leading up to the national championship game in college football. So Coach Jim Leavitt coming up here in just a minute or two. Appreciate you finding us. Remember, on Twitter at JPO Sports. If you have any questions or comments, love to hear from you. And if you haven't already done so, hit that subscribe button below on the Powers on Sports podcast. The video interviews, you can see this video intro on my YouTube channel, Jason Powers Sports Channel. And you can also, again, check out the Florida Football Insiders podcast, as well as my No Quarter Given podcast, which talks all things Tampa Bay Buccaneers. Have a great week, and we will see you next week following the national championship.